The night was heavy, and the moon hung low over the kingdom, pale and watchful. Shadows moved like living things through the forest surrounding the capital, whispering secrets that only the brave or the foolish dared to hear. In the heart of this darkness, Liara walked alone, her cloak brushing against the cold earth. She could feel the power inside her, restless and dangerous, responding to every step, every thought, every memory of the day that had shattered her. She had been summoned to the palace for the ritual, the sacred ceremony meant to bind fated mates. The prophecy had named her as the mate of Prince Kael, heir to the Alpha King. All believed this union would bring strength to the kingdom, seal old magic, and fulfill a destiny older than any living creature in the realm. But when the moment came, Kael had turned away. His rejection had been sharp, deliberate, and complete. Liara's chest still ached from his words. "I will not be bound by prophecy," he had said, eyes cold, voice unwavering. "You are not my mate," the court had gasped. Whispers had spread like wildfire, accusing her of deception, of lies, of ambition beyond her station. Liara's pride had fought against the shame, but even pride could not dull the sting. She had fled the palace before she could respond, disappearing into the forest that seemed to welcome her sorrow. Now, walking beneath the silver light, Liara felt her power stirring, wild and untamed. The curse had awakened not fully, but enough to mark her as dangerous. It was a shadow of rage and despair, a living thing that whispered in her mind. She had inherited this from her ancestors, women and men who had angered kings, survived betrayals, and carried magic that the court feared. The same magic now pulsed through her veins, echoing Kael's rejection. Her footsteps brought her to the edge of a clearing. Moonlight fell on a circle of ancient stones, carved with runes that glowed faintly. Liara stepped forward, feeling the energy hum beneath her fingers. Here, away from judgmental eyes, she could let her sorrow flow into something stronger. Her magic whispered back to her, and she listened. "You are alone," a voice said. Liara spun, instinct sharp, ready to defend herself. The voice belonged to no man she knew, yet it carried authority, confidence, and a weight that made her chest tighten. From the shadows emerged a figure taller and broader than any warrior she had seen. Silver hair caught the moonlight, and eyes gray as storm clouds pierced through the dark. King Eric, the Alpha King himself, father of Kael, stepped into the clearing with an air that commanded silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath at his arrival. Liara straightened. "Your Majesty," she said, keeping her voice steady though her heart pounded like a drum. "I have come for her," Eric said, his gaze never leaving hers. "The one they call Liara." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if the forest itself would obey his words. Liara felt a mixture of fear and something else, a curiosity that pricked at her soul. "And why would the Alpha King of this kingdom come for me?" she asked. Arik's eyes softened just slightly, revealing a glimpse of warmth beneath the command. "Because you are in danger, because a curse has awakened within you, and no one here has the strength or the wisdom to control it. I intend to see that you are protected." Liara frowned. Protected or claimed? The words slipped from her lips before she could stop them. Eric did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, the ground beneath his boots almost glowing with the pull of his power. "Perhaps both," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "And perhaps neither. That choice, for now, is yours, though the time will come when it will not be." The tension in the clearing was electric. Liara could feel her heart thrumming in her chest, matching the rhythm of her magic. She wanted to ask questions, wanted to flee, but something about Eric rooted her in place. He was dangerous, yes, but also inevitable. The forest whispered again, and in the shadows, creatures she had never seen before stirred and watched. Their eyes glimmered like distant stars, reflecting the power that now surrounded her. Liara realized then that her destiny was not merely bound to a prince who had rejected her, it was bound to this king, this man who moved like storm clouds across the earth. "You are not the mate I was promised," Liara said finally, her voice shaking but firm. Eric's expression was unreadable, but his eyes softened, revealing a rare flicker of emotion. "Perhaps rejection is not the end," he said. "Perhaps it is the beginning." Liara did not know whether to feel hope or fear. The prophecy had been clear, yet its meaning was shrouded in mystery. Was this king an enemy, a savior, or something else entirely? She could not tell. And yet she felt drawn to him in a way that made her knees weak. Suddenly, the wind shifted, cold and biting, carrying the scent of smoke and iron. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, curling around the stone circle like serpents. Liara's magic flared, responding to the threat even before she fully understood it. The curse within her whispered, demanding release, and she resisted, knowing that uncontrolled power would bring ruin. "Enough," Arik commanded, and the shadows recoiled as if they feared him. His voice was both steel and velvet, cutting through the dark. "This is not your battle alone." Liara's breath came in ragged gasps. She had never met anyone who could command her fear and curiosity simultaneously. "Why help me?" she asked, though her voice barely rose above the rustling of leaves. Eric stepped closer, and for a moment, the moonlight caught the edges of his armor, making him appear larger than life. "Because the kingdom suffers when power is wasted or misused," he said. "Because you are stronger than you know. And because some debts must be repaid. By me, by you, by fate itself." Liara's mind raced. She wanted to flee, to hide, to deny the pull she felt toward him. But her body remained rooted, and her magic, responding to the storm within her, hummed with anticipation. She realized she was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to sorrow and rejection. The other led into darkness and power, with a king whose presence was as terrifying as it was intoxicating. Then, as if summoned by her thoughts, a figure emerged from the deeper shadows. A wolf, larger than any normal creature, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. It growled softly, a warning and a greeting all at once. Liara understood immediately. The kingdom itself was watching her, judging her, calling her to her fate. Eric did not flinch. Instead, he lowered his hand, and the wolf stepped back, bowing its massive head, in recognition of his authority. "The forest obeys the Alpha King," he said softly, almost to himself. "And soon, it will obey her as well." Liara's heart tightened. She had been rejected, cast aside by the prince. Yet here was a man who claimed her in ways that were both terrifying and thrilling. Her destiny was no longer hers alone. The curse stirred within her, whispering promises of power and vengeance, but also warning of danger and loss. She felt the weight of prophecy pressing against her chest, heavier than any armor, sharper than any blade. "I do not know if I can trust you," Liara said finally. Eric's gaze softened, but there was steel beneath the warmth. "Trust is not given freely in this world," he said. "It is earned through trials, through fire, and through choice. You will have both before the next moon rises." A sudden gust of wind extinguished the faint light of the runes, plunging the clearing into deeper shadow. Liara shivered, though the chill was not entirely from the cold. The king stepped closer, and though she wanted to step back, her feet remained still. Fate had chosen its path, and she was caught in the current. "You will not face this alone," Eric said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The contact was electric, sending a shiver down her spine and stirring emotions she did not understand. I will see that the curse does not destroy you or the kingdom. But you must be willing to fight, Liara. Will you? Liara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision settle over her. She could run, flee into the night, and hide from destiny. Or she could stand, embrace the power within her, and accept the protection and challenge of the Alpha King. Her heart beat faster, a mix of fear, longing, and determination. Finally, she nodded. I will fight, she said. But know this, I do not belong to you. Eric's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. Perhaps not yet, he said, but soon, all will be revealed. As the wind carried their words into the dark forest, Liara felt the shadows of her curse stretch and twist around her, alive and restless. The kingdom waited. The prophecy moved forward, and the Alpha King watched her with eyes that could see through steel and magic alike. The night had only just begun, and so had her true journey. The palace loomed above the forest like a shadow frozen in time. Its high towers and dark stone walls reflected the silver light of the moon, making it look both regal and menacing. Inside, torches flickered along the hallways, casting moving shadows that danced across tapestries depicting battles and victories long past. The kingdom held its breath, for the arrival of Liara, fated mate rejected and yet now claimed, was no ordinary event. King Arik moved through the halls with a calm authority. Courtiers bowed, whispers followed him, but he ignored all of it. His focus was on Liara, who walked behind him with a quiet determination, still hesitant, still wary of the man who now held her fate in his hands. This is your home now, Arik said softly as they entered the grand hall, the high ceilings echoing their footsteps. Not because you were rejected, but because you belong to something greater. Liara's eyes swept the room. Nobles and advisors stared at her, some with fear, some with envy. Kale, the prince who had rejected her, stood in the far corner, hands clenched, jaw tight. His eyes flicked to her repeatedly, filled with something she could not name: regret, confusion, perhaps jealousy. Liara's heart tightened at the sight of him. Every nerve in her body wanted to turn away, to flee to the forest where shadows were safe, where no one could judge her. Yet, the pull of Arik, of the king himself, kept her rooted in place. Arik approached Kael first, his presence commanding respect without a word. Step forward, son, he said, voice firm. You have failed your duty as a prince, but that does not mean the kingdom fails. Liara will remain under my protection, and you will not interfere. Kael's jaw hardened, and his hands trembled slightly. Father, she is not mine, but I. Enough, Arik said, cutting him off. The power in his voice made Kael flinch. You do not command this. She is not yours to claim, and you will learn humility, whether by choice or by consequence. Liara watched the exchange, a storm of emotions churning inside her. She had expected anger, humiliation, maybe even pity. What she did not expect was the respect in Arik's voice, the way he acknowledged her without treating her as weak or broken. In that moment, she realized that her place was not with Kael. Her fate had shifted, and the king himself was the pivot. The nobles murmured, some outraged by the claim, others intrigued. The king has chosen. But why? One whispered. Is it power, or something more? Arik's eyes met Liara's, and for the first time, she felt seen. Not as the rejected mate, not as a pawn in prophecy, but as a person with strength, will, and magic. This is not about desire, Liara, he said quietly, so that only she could hear. It is about protection, destiny, and balance. Liara swallowed hard. And if I refuse? She asked, though she already sensed the impossibility of that choice. You will not refuse, Arik said with calm certainty. Not because I command you, but because destiny does not offer choices once the threads are woven. As the words settled, Liara felt the stirrings of her curse intensify. Shadows flickered along the walls, unseen by anyone else, responding to the tension between her emotions and her growing power. She felt it like fire beneath her skin, wild and restless. Kale stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I was meant to protect her. I was meant to—" "You were meant to learn humility," Eric said, eyes sharp as a blade. "And perhaps one day, you will understand the cost of pride." Kale's face fell, but he did not argue further. His gaze lingered on Liara, a mixture of regret and confusion. She held his look for only a moment before turning to Eric. The king's presence was overwhelming, his aura a shield of power that calmed her wild magic. For the first time since the rejection, she felt a sense of possibility. Eric led her to the inner chambers, a room filled with ancient tomes, scrolls, and artifacts. The walls were lined with magic runes that pulsed softly, and in the center of the room was a circular platform carved from obsidian, etched with symbols of protection and binding. "This is where you will learn," Eric said, gesturing to the platform. "Your magic must be honed, not feared. Your curse is not a punishment. It is a gift, if you understand it." Liara stepped onto the platform, feeling the runes hum beneath her feet. Shadows twisted around her, whispering, testing her resolve. Eric stood beside her, silent and steady. "Do not fear it," he said. "Let it flow through you, not against you. Control it, or it will control you." The lesson was grueling. Her magic surged in waves, responding to her fear, her anger, her grief. Liara cried out, struggling to focus, and the room shook with the power she barely controlled. Yet through it all, Eric's presence anchored her. He guided her without touching, without forcing, and she began to see the shape of her potential. Powerful, controlled, unstoppable, if she could master it. Hours passed, though time felt twisted in the chamber. When she finally collapsed, exhausted, Eric knelt beside her. His hand hovered over hers, a gesture of protection rather than possession. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly, "and you will need all of it. The kingdom is not kind to those who are powerful and alone." Liara looked up at him, the fire of her rebellion dimmed, but not gone. "And what of Kale?" she asked quietly. Eric's gaze darkened slightly. "He is still learning," he said. "Some lessons can only be learned through loss and regret. Your path is not his. Do not let him cloud your choices." End quote. The following days were a test of endurance, will, and emotion. Liara trained under Eric's guidance, learning to bend shadows, summon light, and control the energy that roiled through her. With every passing day, she felt herself growing not just in power, but in confidence, in self-respect. She saw the court differently now, understood the politics, the danger, and the necessity of strength. Kale's presence remained a constant shadow. He avoided open confrontation, but his jealousy and regret were obvious. Every glance he cast at her was a mix of longing and frustration. He had rejected her, and now he watched her rise under the tutelage of the man he could not surpass. Liara felt a sense of satisfaction, tempered by sadness. He had been a part of her destiny, yet he could not claim it. One evening, as the moon hung low and silver, Eric summoned her to the palace balcony. The wind blew through her hair, carrying the scent of the forest and the distant mountains. Below, the city shimmered with torchlight, a living tapestry of life and shadow. "You have grown," Eric said, standing close but not touching. His eyes reflected the moonlight, gray and stormy, filled with unspoken emotion. Stronger, sharper, more certain. Yet the greatest test lies ahead. You must face your curse fully, or it will consume you and all you love. Liara's heart raced. She had begun to understand the depth of her power, but fear still lingered. And, if I fail? She asked. You will not fail, Arik said, his voice firm yet gentle. I will not allow it, but you must trust me. And soon, you will trust yourself. The shadows around them stirred, as if responding to his words. Liara felt the pulse of her magic in the air, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She realized then that her bond with Arik was more than mentorship. It was guidance, protection, and something deeper, a connection that terrified and thrilled her. From the corner of her vision, Kael watched, silent and tense. He could not see the bond forming between Liara and his father, could not understand the magnetic pull that now tied them together. His rejection had set this all in motion, and he would have to bear the consequences. Suddenly, a distant howl split the night, a sound that made the shadows quake. Liara's magic reacted instantly, flaring outward, and she felt a surge of power unlike anything before. The curse within her called to the world. Hungry, restless. She looked to Arik, fear and exhilaration mingling in her chest. Control it, he commanded, and with a wave of his hand, the chaos stilled. The night fell silent again, the city below, oblivious to the danger that had almost erupted. Liara sank to her knees, trembling but exhilarated. I felt it, she whispered. The curse, it's more than I imagined. Arik placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. And you will master it, he said, not because I demand it, but because you are meant to. Your power is a force that will shape the kingdom, and your destiny is entwined with mine now. There is no turning back. Liara looked at him, at the man who had claimed her fate, and felt a mixture of fear, awe, and something she could not yet name. Her journey had begun with rejection, but now it had taken a turn she could never have imagined. The night deepened, and the wind whispered secrets through the palace halls. Shadows shifted, magic stirred, and the kingdom waited for the next move in a game far older and darker than any she had known. The full moon rose high above the kingdom, casting silver light over the palace and the surrounding forests. Shadows stretched long and dark, and the air was thick with magic and anticipation. Liara stood at the edge of the palace balcony, her cloak fluttering in the cold wind. Her heart thumped like a drum, equal parts fear and resolve. Tonight, she would face the full force of her curse, and she knew the kingdom itself might tremble beneath her power. King Arik emerged silently behind her, his presence steady and commanding. Even in the moonlight, his figure was larger than life, every movement radiating control and strength. Liara felt the familiar pull, a tension that was more than physical. It was the bond forming between them, a force as inevitable as the tide. Are you ready? Arik asked, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of inevitability. Liara nodded, though doubt lingered in her chest. I am, but I fear what I may become. Arik placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. Fear is natural. Courage is choice. Tonight, you will choose courage. The palace gates opened with a distant, echoing creak, and shadows moved through the courtyard. Creatures drawn to her curse emerged from the darkness, twisted forms of smoke and light, their eyes glowing with hunger. Liara felt the surge of power within her, wild and unrestrained, threatening to overwhelm her. Control it, Arik said sharply, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. Do not let it consume you. Let it guide you, not bind you. Liara inhaled deeply, focusing on the rhythm of her magic. She had trained for weeks under Arik's guidance, learning to bend the shadows, to channel her energy, and to resist the pull of rage and fear. Now, every lesson mattered. She raised her hands, and the shadows around her responded, twisting into shapes that obeyed her will. From the darkness, Kael appeared, stepping cautiously into the courtyard. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear and awe. "Liara, wait," he called, but she did not falter. The rejection had been sharp, but it had taught her strength. She no longer needed his validation. "Step aside, Kael," Arik said, his voice cold but controlled. "This is not your battle. Your role has ended." Kael's shoulders tensed, but he did not move forward. Instead, he watched, powerless against the display of her growing power and the king's authority. Liara felt a flicker of pity for him, a memory of what could have been, but she let it pass. Her destiny was not with him. It was with Arik, with the path fate had carved for her. The shadows surged, circling the courtyard like a living storm. Liara felt her curse react, pulling at her soul, whispering of destruction, of fear, of temptation. She closed her eyes, remembering Arik's guidance, the hours of training, and the trust he had placed in her. Slowly, deliberately, she let the magic flow through her, not against her, but with her. A brilliant light erupted from her hands, illuminating the courtyard. The shadows screamed and twisted, then bent to her will, forming protective shapes around her and Arik. The creatures of the curse, once wild and chaotic, became part of her control. Their hunger transformed into obedience. Liara gasped, feeling a surge of triumph and relief. She had faced the curse and she had not been destroyed. She had mastered it. Arik stepped closer, his eyes reflecting pride and something deeper, more intimate. "You have done it," he said softly. "Not because I held your hand, but because you chose to rise." Liara looked at him, heart pounding. The fear, the anger, the sorrow, they were still there, but tempered by a newfound confidence. "It is not just my power," she said. "It is ours, together." The king's hand brushed against hers, gentle but intentional. The touch sent a shiver through her body, a mixture of excitement and comfort. The connection between them was undeniable. A bond forged not just by magic, but by respect, understanding, and shared struggle. From the shadows, Kael watched, realization dawning. He had rejected her, yet here she stood, powerful and untouchable, her destiny intertwined with his father, the Alpha King. Pride and regret warred in his chest, and he finally understood that love was not possession, it was choice, courage, and understanding, and he had given her none of these. The creatures of the curse had settled, their threat neutralized, but a sense of tension lingered in the night. Liara knew this was only the beginning of her journey. Power brought responsibility, and the kingdom would test her again. But for the first time, she felt ready. Arik guided her to the inner chambers, where the runes glowed faintly, reflecting the calm after the storm. "Your journey is far from over," he said. "The kingdom still faces threats, old rivals, and the shadows of prophecy. But tonight, you have proven yourself. You have proven that fate is not a chain, but a challenge to rise above." Liara sank into a chair, exhaustion and relief washing over her. She had faced rejection, fear, and the darkest parts of her own power, and emerged stronger. Yet her gaze drifted to Arik, and she felt a pull she could not deny. This man had guided her, protected her, and believed in her when others had faltered. "Why me?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Arik knelt beside her, his presence gentle yet commanding. "Because destiny chose you. Because strength recognizes strength. Because the kingdom, and I, needed someone who could rise from rejection and claim power without losing herself." Liara's heart fluttered. The words were more than flattery, they were truth, recognition of her courage, her struggles, and her choices. She realized then that her bond with Arik was more than protection or guidance. It was partnership, respect, and something deeper, an unspoken promise that they would face the future together. Kale's silhouette appeared at the doorway once more, hesitant. I see now, he said quietly. You were never mine to claim, and perhaps you belong where you are meant to be. Liara nodded, a mixture of sorrow and closure filling her heart. She had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for hers. The chapter of rejection had ended, replaced by the chapter of power, choice, and destiny. The moon hung high, casting silver light through the windows. Liara rose, stepping to the balcony once more. Eric joined her, standing close but giving her space, their connection unspoken yet palpable. Will this bond last? She asked softly. Eric turned to her, eyes filled with stormy gray and something tender, almost vulnerable. It is not merely a bond, he said. It is a promise, a journey, and it will shape us both. You are no longer alone, Liara. Not in magic, not in destiny, not in life. The wind blew through their hair, carrying the sense of forest and firelight, of distant mountains and whispered prophecy. Liara felt the power of her magic, the bond with Eric, and the quiet strength within herself. She knew the path ahead would be filled with trials, shadows, and challenges, but for the first time, she felt ready to walk it. Together, they stood in silence, watching the kingdom below. The prophecy had not ended with rejection. It had begun with it, shaping them, testing them, and ultimately, bringing them together. Liara felt her curse, now tamed and guided, pulse gently within her, a reminder of what she had overcome and what she was destined to become. Eric's hand found hers, steady and warm. Liara intertwined her fingers with his, feeling a sense of completion she had never known. The court, the shadows, the prophecy, all of it faded into the background. What mattered now was trust, strength, and the bond they had forged in fire and magic. Kael watched from the distance, silent and humbled. The prince had learned that love, power, and destiny were not to be taken lightly. He turned away, leaving the balcony to Liara and Eric, understanding at last that some fates are not ours to claim, they are ours to rise to meet. The night deepened, the moonlight washing the kingdom in silver and shadow. Liara and Eric remained side by side, silent, unspoken words passing between them in the quiet. Their journey together had only just begun, and the shadows of the kingdom whispered promises of trials, victories, and magic yet to come. For Liara, rejection had been only the first step. The curse had been the second. And now, bound by choice and destiny to the Alpha King, she had found power, trust, and a path forward. A path where she would rise, not as a rejected mate, but as a force to be reckoned with, a partner to the king, and a legend in her own right.